Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my double Game Week 33 team selection where I have my bench boost active and 2 free transfers to use. If you did enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, before we look ahead to Game Week 33, let's briefly review Game Week 32 now that is over, and we've seen obviously the second game of the double game week between Newcastle and Crystal Palace. And by the way, apologies if I sound slightly different today or there's a lot of cuts. I'm quite ill at the moment, hence why there was no Game Week preview video yesterday, but FPL moves pretty fast. We need to do our team selection video today, so apologies if it is slightly off. I will do my best, but it was a small red arrow. And when I say a small red arrow, we're literally talking just over 1,000 places. And it's a bit of a cliche, but I'll absolutely take that. You'll hear a lot of people say that when they don't have a chip active, and I will absolutely take that because it is a double game week where a lot of people played the triple captain, and it wasn't bad on Isak, or if you played it on Murphy or Barnes, congratulations. But the triple captain was active for a lot, the bench boost was active for a lot as well, and I obviously wasn't playing a chip. So I probably would have taken even a reasonably sized red arrow. So definitely, to be only a couple of points off a green, it's brilliant. We spoke about a lot of the stuff already in the transfer plans video earlier this week, so I don't really want to spend much time here reviewing Game Week 32, other than just to say, obviously, the Bradley transfer worked out really well for me. Gutted that I benched Konsa, especially when you look at Gvardiol and Munoz, because those extra points would have been really nice. And it does go to show that double game weeks can be fantastic, right? We've got Isak with an 11-pointer, and really, it should have been so much more. He missed 3 big chances against Crystal Palace. Murphy with a 19-pointer. I think Barnes ended on 27 points. Dan Burn and Livramento getting 7 and 8. It shows that double game weeks can be fantastic, and this is why we attack them. Most of my top scorers this week, in fact, my 2 top scorers, both had a double game week. But then you look on the flip side, Mateta 2, Sar 7, Eze got 6 after missing the penalty, and then Munoz -1. And I think especially when there's a defender that is playing for a team that aren't perfect defensively, even if they're relatively decent like Crystal Palace, but that doesn't have particularly good fixtures, you can genuinely get 0, 1, 2, or sometimes, as in this case, a -1. A double game week isn't always better than a single game week. And I'm looking at someone like Ezri Konsa in Game Week 33, who's got Newcastle and Man City, and thinking, I don't expect a clean sheet in either. Both Newcastle and City have shown this week that they can score 5+ goals in a given game. Maybe chasing the doubles isn't always the best thing. However, again, I then look back to Burn, Murphy, Isak, and think, if there is a decent double to attack, as is the case with someone like Arsenal or Man City, then it probably is worth attacking. You also just need a bit of luck on your side as well, right? Dan Burn could have had an assist if Isak had finished that chance this week. Eze, if he'd have scored the penalty, would have had many more points, and he had a goal that was marginally ruled out due to offside. So FPL is a game of luck, but there's always this debate every year about how much doubles are a bit of a trap, and I think certainly if it is a very, very difficult double, as is the case with even Palace this week against Bournemouth and Arsenal, it does pull into question whether it's really worth attacking them. So there we go, 81 points. That is a small red arrow from 25.2k to 26.4k. Let me know how many points you managed for Game Week 32. But now the real reason you're here, let's focus on Game Week 33 and how that bench boost is looking. So guys, looking ahead to Game Week 33, I have 1.4 million in the bank and I have 2 free transfers. And just to confirm, I am indeed playing the bench boost this week, which is why the team looks slightly different, as you can see on your screen, which I'll explain in a second, because it, I think, is going to help me try and think about the transfers that I want to make. But yeah, bench boost this week, free hit next week, which means coming out of the free hit in Game Week 35, for the final 4 game weeks, I will have no chips available. And if we do have a double Game Week 36 and a blank Game Week 37, as we expect due to the FA Cup final, I'll just have to deal with that as I can. And there might be a few hits flying. But yeah, that is the current plan. Bench boost this week, free hit next week. Final thing, I'm less than 800 subscribers away from 150,000. That was the goal that I set at the start of the season to hit by the end of this season. So only 800 left. So if you are watching this right now, and there's usually about 5,000 to 10,000 people that watch these videos every week that don't subscribe, please consider subscribing. I would really appreciate it. So, the reason that I've set the team up in this way, I think I'm getting a little bit hung up on, in a bench boost, right? The reason that we set a realistic bench, and people say it doesn't matter, all 15 contribute. The reason you set a realistic bench is to know what your bench actually scored, because you can't really tell what your bench boost score is if you put all of your best players on the bench. So the reason you build that realistic bench is to have a bit of an idea about how successful the chip is. So I will always, and you'll see that going into Game Week 33 at the deadline, I will put my weakest players on the bench. But in terms of trying to decide which combination of transfers to use, I actually think it's hindering me a little bit because I'm getting too caught up on if I make this move, this player's... I should just look at my 15 now. I'm definitely playing the bench boost regardless of what happens. Look at my 15 and think, where is the best place to use these transfers and do I want to take it here? So for that reason, I've changed the way the team's set up. There is no bench for this part. I'm just going to show you all 15 players, review the 15 and discuss where I think I might use my 2 free transfers. I would say almost 50-50 at this stage that I might take a -4 hit. There aren't many transfer combinations that I can think of which involve a -8 hit. That would require me to get a negative update about someone I didn't expect in the press conferences. So it's either going to be use both free transfers or use 2 free transfers and take a -4. But we'll discuss all of that when we've seen the team in its entirety. So let's start with the goalkeepers. One place in the team where I can see absolutely no transfers being used. Raya and Areola are absolutely fine. We saw just how good Arsenal are defensively against Real Madrid. I think the end XG conceded in that game was 1.5, but after like 70 minutes, it was 0.2 XG. At half-time, they don't concede. It was like 0.11 XG conceded against Real Madrid at the Bernabeu in the first half. In the first leg, it was only 0.5 XGC. Arsenal's defence is fantastic, and it doesn't seem to have dropped off at all without Gabriel. And I know they've not kept any clean sheets, I don't think, in the Prem for the last 3 games. But even against Brentford, it was 0.19 XGC. That's a Brentford attack that know how to create chances as well. They're just absolutely elite. And I think Kivior has stepped in so well alongside Saliba. Lewis Skelly is playing at an incredibly high level. They've got Timber, White. Even Calafiori will be back soon. I just think the personnel doesn't seem to be as important as the system that Arteta has set up. So yeah, I think having Raya is great. And ideally, as we'll discuss in a second, I'd like to add a second Arsenal defender. And Areola, I chose him for this reason. Do I expect a clean sheet against Southampton? Probably not, because FPL doesn't work out that way. We actually saw last week, like, loads of people loaded up on Verbruggen and Dunk against Leicester, and they conceded 2 goals. Like, before that moment, Leicester hadn't scored a goal in, like, 65 years or something in the Premier League, but they hadn't scored for a long time. They scored 2. So I am fully aware that West Ham will probably concede, but on paper, Southampton at home feels like a good fixture, and if he does concede, hopefully he can make some saves. So Ryan Areola as a pairing are great. When we then move on to the defence, I'm actually very happy with 4 of them. So I've got 3 double game week defenders. Gvardiol probably the best of the bunch considering the fixtures, considering if he plays at centre-back, he's good for baseline bonus. If he plays at left-back, he's got good attacking threat. I would obviously rather him play at left-back, but O'Reilly's playing very well, and Kushinov, for whatever reason, doesn't seem to be in the 11. So, again, if he's at centre-back and he keeps a clean sheet, it'll be very good for bonus, but I hope at least one of the games he plays at left-back. Is there a chance he's rotated? Of course, there's a chance anyone is rotated at the moment, but I would fancy him to continue starting. So yeah, Gvardiol's great. And I've got Munoz and Konsa. I don't think I'll get a clean sheet from Konsa or Munoz. I think in all 4 of those games, they'll concede. But just for appearance points, they will pick up 4. Could they get minus points, as we saw with Munoz in Game Week 32? Absolutely. I'm not sure that I would be desperate to go out and buy a Crystal Palace or an Aston Villa defender this week. So if you're sat there with no Palace defender, no Villa defender, I could definitely make an argument that, let's say you can't get to a City or Arsenal defender, that someone like a Connor Bradley or Konate could outscore Munoz and Konsa this week. I mean, he did it last week. He outscored Munoz by 10 points, Bradley. So just because a defender has a double, I wouldn't be that keen to go out there and get them if you don't see a clean sheet. With the attackers, I think it's slightly different, because even against Arsenal, could Ismaila Sarr or Eze get something? Yes. And I know Munoz has insane attacking threat. I'm just not particularly excited by the defenders that aren't playing for Man City or Arsenal. So basically, the Villa and Palace defenders. That being said, am I still okay to have them in the team? Of course I am. So Munoz and Konsa, not very high hopes, but still happy to have at least a couple more doublers. And then in terms of the single game week defenders, at the moment I've got Bradley and Burn. On Connor Bradley, I am delighted I bought him in Game Week 32. He got me a 9-pointer last week, and this week he plays Leicester. And if you were to ask me right this second, before the Arne Slot press conference, which I think will take place on Friday, Yes, I'm very, very happy to have Bradley for Leicester, and I think he'll start. Unfortunately, though, as of, I think it was on Wednesday morning we got this news, but Trent has been back in team training. Now, I don't know if he did the entire team training session. I don't know if that was just his first session back. I think regardless, I would be surprised if Trent just goes straight back in and starts instead of Bradley, considering in Game Week 32, he had a really good performance against West Ham, not just from an FPL perspective, but I think he had a really good game. And it sounds, by all accounts, that Trent is off to Madrid, right? Van Dijk and Salah have signed their contracts. There's been no mention of Trent. So if Trent is off to Madrid, I think what Liverpool need to decide is Bradley their first choice right back? And do they need to sign a backup for Bradley? Or is Bradley not someone that they want to rely on for the future? And instead they need to sign a first choice right back and Bradley is the backup. That's a decision that I still don't think they are fully sure on. It obviously comes down to his fitness and availability too, which they need to test. So I think by all accounts, the most intelligent thing to do for Liverpool would be to play Bradley in the remaining games of the season. Obviously, in Game Week 38, I think they've got Crystal Palace at home at Anfield. Give Trent the start there, of course, and bring him off in the 66th minute or something. Like, do something nice for him in that final game. But if he's not staying at Liverpool, I don't see why they would invest all of that time in the games they've got remaining, starting Trent ahead of Bradley. So, I even think once Trent is fully back and fully fit and available, I think Bradley could start. But I think this would put me off buying Bradley. I know there are a lot of questions out there about would you still go out there and buy. I don't know that I would, because we've got a probable double Game Week 36 and blank Game Week 37. And if you're free hitting in 34 and you're using your transfers this week, we are going to come out in Game Week 35 with probably one free transfer. I just don't know that you want to add further issues to your team. So maybe I'll just go out there and get a Konate or Van Dijk if you can afford them. But back on Bradley, the fact that I already own him, I do expect Bradley to probably start this game. And fingers crossed he does, because if he doesn't, it's a bit of a sticky situation there. But if he gets 60, plays against Leicester, starts, I think he'll do very well. The other defender is Dan Burn. I think Dan Burn's okay to keep here, but Villa at home, regardless of how many fixtures Villa have, and that's the one thing with Villa, is they have games all over the place, right? They were playing in Europe. They've got the double game week. They've got the FA Cup. They have 8 games in 24 days. So they are going to be a little bit tired and a little bit rotated, but I still don't really expect a clean sheet for Dan Burn. And whilst he can score a header, he almost got an assist in Game Week 32. I don't love the idea of having Dan Burn on my bench boost. If it was Livramento, he has been extremely attacking Livramento and very unfortunate not to get more attacking returns. I'd feel a bit better about keeping him if it was Livramento, but I just don't think he carries the same attacking threat. So basically, I'm happy with both goalkeepers and 4 of my defenders. Dan Burn, there is a world in which I would keep him if I need to make more transfers in the attack, but I'm also looking at potentially taking Dan Burn out. In terms of the transfers that I might make in terms of replacing Dan Burn, I'll discuss that towards the end of the video when we do a bit of live tinkering and going through my team. But for now, that's the defence. Let's move on to the midfield. So guys, moving on to the midfield, and this is the place where I can see the most transfers maybe taking place, and the part of the team that I am most unsure on. One player who I think is great is Mohamed Salah. I think he's a great captaincy option this week. We've seen that the doubles don't necessarily result in points. Some of these doubles aren't fantastic for the likes of Villa and Palace. Even Man City's, you could argue, isn't the best. The best double is for Arsenal, but who's going to start both? We could see Saka and Marino only starting 1 game each. Do you really want to captain a defender? When you look at the doubles, there isn't a standout captain, so I don't mind Mohamed Salah. I won't be doing it because I would always prefer to attack the upside of having 2 bites at the show. We saw with like Harvey Barnes, 2 options to score, and if they do in both games, Salah, maybe famous last words, isn't getting 27 points. Whereas you can see that with a double game week player. So I'll always chase the upside, but you could result in something, as we saw with Mateta, where they get 1 point in both. It's possible. So I would be surprised if Salah doesn't return in some regard. I really don't mind the captaincy shout, but I probably won't be doing it. I've then got 3 double game week players in Murphy. I'll discuss Murphy in a second. Another player that I'm very happy with is Saka. There's going to be lots of discussion around whether Saka will start both in the double. The truth is, I don't know. I would probably put it at random percentage that I'm making up on the spot. 60% likelihood that he starts both games. I said before the Real Madrid second leg, best case scenario is Saka plays 60 to 70 minutes, scores a goal, and comes off. He got more than 70 minutes, just about. Scored the goal, looked really good. He did hobble off, as he always does, but I think he looked fine in terms of his injury. He looked pretty sharp. The only way to get Saka into the best place the remainder of the season, and specifically for those Real Madrid ties, is to get him fully fit. And the only way to get him fully fit is to get him playing more minutes. So I do think they'll be careful with him. I wouldn't be surprised if he plays 60 to 70 minutes in both of these games and then comes off. In fact, I would be maybe expect less minutes against Ipswich, either off the bench or maybe 60. Against Palace, he could even get 80 to 90 because the gap between the games is actually pretty kind for Arsenal. So they had the Real Madrid second leg on Wednesday. They then play against Ipswich on Sunday. So Wednesday to Sunday is a decent turnaround. You've got Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 3 days in between, not including obviously the days that they play the games. The shortest turnaround though is then between Ipswich and Crystal Palace in the double. So it's Sunday to Wednesday. So only the Monday, Tuesday in terms of recovery. But then, between Crystal Palace and PSG, because obviously they're not playing in Game Week 34 and they're not in the FA Cup, they've got a 6-day break. So it's played on the Wednesday, Crystal Palace, and then the Tuesday, the first leg against PSG. So they don't really need to heavily rest Saka against Crystal Palace, considering it's a 6-day break. So what would I expect for the double? I think 80 minutes plus against Crystal Palace. That's my prediction right now. I think they'll try and get him in a good place. They'll give him good minutes because they want to keep momentum and build up that fitness. Against Ipswich, I think you'll get 30 to 60. That's not helpful because he could then be on the bench or starting. I just don't think we know. I'd be surprised if he gets more than about 60 minutes against Ipswich, considering, obviously, like I said, Real Madrid to Ipswich is fine, but then Ipswich to Crystal Palace isn't, and I think they'll want to start him against Crystal Palace. So I think in the double, for Saka, this is my prediction right now, you'll get somewhere between 110 and 140 minutes. I think that's good enough to have and buy Bukayo Saka. Is that enough to trust him with the armband? That's up to you. If you think he starts Ipswich, gets 60, and gets 80 against Palace, which I think is possible, then maybe he is worth trusting with the armband. And I've not fully ruled it out myself, but as of right now, I just think Marmoush has better expected minutes. That could be famous last words. He might get benched. But I think if his minutes are predicted to be slightly better, I think he's still a great captaincy option. He's getting a lot of big chances at the moment. I'm just currently leaning that way just about. But I think in terms of whether it's worth buying Bukayo Saka, I still think it is, because I think you get at least one start, potentially two. The other double game I'm absolutely fine with is Ismaila Sarr. It's not a great double, and I do think Crystal Palace, and it's one of the reasons I like Saka, I think they will rotate quite heavily against Arsenal because they've got the FA Cup semi-final, which should have most of their attention. I think they're going to rest a few key players against Arsenal to prepare for that game. And so Sarr might not start both, and that's crazy to say because his minutes have been so good, but we also don't know how much Arsenal might rotate in that game. And the Bournemouth game, it's hit and miss at the moment with Bournemouth. Bournemouth could turn up and be absolutely fantastic, as we saw against Fulham, or, although they conceded a lot of chances, but getting the win, or they could turn up and concede loads of chances, which we've seen in the games before that. So it's not a terrible double. And Sarr, by the way, scored against Arsenal earlier this season in that 5-1 loss. So you never know. I expect him to still probably start both. I just think his minutes in that second game might not be perfect. But he's a doubler. I don't know who else I'd move to. Sarr is okay. So Salah, Saka, Sarr, absolutely fine. The two players I'm slightly concerned about is Foden and Murphy. Do you know what? Let's start with Murphy here, because I don't know why I'm concerned. He could just stay, really. Murphy's been absolutely brilliant. There was a graphic that popped up. I can't remember the date. It was since like maybe the middle of December or the start of January. But in the last few months, Murphy has the third most attacking returns in the Premier League. Only Salah and Isak have more returns than Murphy. I sat there last night thinking, why am I selling Murphy again? And I mean, that was one of the questions that I'll answer towards the end that a few of you are asking. It's just to chase the upside with the doublers. Now, do I think Murphy has a high ceiling against Villa away? Probably not. I think he could get a return, could get a goal, maybe a goal and an assist. I wouldn't expect him to go and get like a 14-pointer as he did in the second game of 32. But also, I probably didn't expect that against a Crystal Palace team that largely before this game week had been performing at an okay level defensively. So I think it's a game that will suit him against Villa. We know that Villa will push up quite high. It will leave space for Newcastle to counter-attack. I really don't mind the idea of keeping Murphy. If you're sat there right now and you're thinking, I could keep Murphy on my bench boost, it means I don't have to take a hit or I can save a transfer and use it elsewhere, I think you could definitely do worse than Jacob Murphy. He's just performing at an incredibly high level. But I really like the idea of Morgan Rogers. And whilst I could do Foden to Rogers, as I'll discuss as a possible transfer option at the end, I think Murphy to Rodgers makes a lot of sense. I think it's a move that a lot of people want to do because you think that Rodgers will start both. He's got two okay fixtures from from an attacking perspective, I should say. You're not expecting Villa to score tons of goals, but you could definitely see them scoring a few. And Rodgers himself is performing at quite a high level right now with decent output. So I just think Murphy to Rodgers makes so much sense. But I am second guessing that because Murphy is just doing so well. Like, he's got 19 points in the previous game week. So I'm unsure, but I still plan on making that move. Phil Foden is the tricky one, right? Because if you tell me that I've got a City attacker that starts one, is on the bench in the other for a decent double game week, I'd probably keep Foden. So if I think there is a good chance that Foden starts one in the double, I don't think I'll make the move. But if we are unsure on his fitness, or if we get a leak, because by the way, Man City are technically the early kickoff because there are no early kickoff games and they play at 3 p.m. So let's say we get a leak that Foden doesn't start against Everton. Do you take that risk? Because if you know for a fact he's not starting one, the best case scenario is he starts the second, but you don't know that you can confirm that. So I think if we get a leak that Foden's not starting Everton, I think I'll have to take him out. Because we've seen with Pep, he doesn't always bring players off the bench. So Foden could get 0 minutes against Everton, and then there's a real concern about how many minutes he gets against Villa. So I think it all comes down to that leak. If we don't get a leak, or we get a negative leak, I think I'll have to sell Phil Foden, and it might be for a -4 hit, depending upon other transfers I make. If we get a positive leak about Foden that he starts against Everton, then I'll probably just keep him, because I'm not necessarily sure that any doublers definitely start both, and if I can confirm he starts one, then that's great. I don't like leaks in FPL, by the way. I will always emphasize that. But whilst they are still a thing and the deadlines allow for it, I will always use the information I get to the best of my ability. We did this in Game Week 32, by the way. We got a leak that Foden wouldn't start. I put Foden third on my bench. So I will be relying on that. Hopefully we get something. If we don't, and again, I'm concerned, I think I'll have to sell him. We'll discuss who I'm looking to bring in, by the way, at the end once we've looked at all of the players. But yeah, as of right now, Murphy and Foden both on the chopping block potentially. Let's look at the 3 forwards and then the players that I'm looking to bring in. So I'll keep it brief with the forwards because I just can't see myself making any transfers in the forward positions right now. And that is currently Mateta, Marmoush, Isak. On Marmoush, I think he is probably the standout captain at the moment, just based on decent double. We think he's on penalties, takes some set pieces, gets lots of chances, even in the absence of Haaland. The chances have been coming. And I just think his minutes are better than Saka. That's the key thing for me, because Saka has the better double. I prefer having midfielders, by the way, because they have an extra point for a goal, extra point for a clean sheet. But as of right now, if you were to tell me that one of them only starts one of the two, I would say Saka is more likely to be benched in one of the games. Now, I can't confirm that Marmoush definitely starts both. Marmoush could be benched in one, but I just don't see the need to do that for Man City. They've obviously got the FA Cup semi-final, which will have some of their attention coming up, but they've got no Champions League. Marmoush looks fairly fit. It's not like when you're watching him, he looks super fatigued and he's getting lots of subs at 60 minutes. So I think by all accounts, we saw how much Pep played Haaland for just 90 minutes every week. I think Marmoush's minutes will continue to be pretty good. So just based on minutes alone, I'm going Marmoush. If between now and the deadline, my confidence increases that Saka starts the Ipswich game, I may well switch to him, because I think he's going to start the Palace game based on the rationale that I said in the midfield section. So if I think he starts the Palace game and my confidence increases that he starts the Ipswich game, then maybe I will go there. But as of now, Marmoush has the armband. And then with Mateta and Isak, I'm not necessarily sure that either are perfect for Game Week 33, but who are we buying instead? The only forward that a lot of people are looking at is Ollie Watkins, but are we confident Ollie Watkins starts both in the double? Not necessarily. Now, I'm not sure that Mateta does, by the way, because again, I could see Palace rotating against Arsenal, and we saw that he was hooked at half-time in the first game of 32. It's just not a transfer that I think is worth making, doing something like Mateta to Watkins, and I'd have to free up a lot of funds as well by like downgrading Foden all the way. Then I'd have to sell Mateta, and I've still got my triple Newcastle. I'm just not in that luxury position right now where that's a move that I want to make. So Mateta just stays by the fact that he has a double. He should now be back on penalties. By the way, I was very surprised that Eze took that pen, because Mateta has taken the pens this season, looked fairly confident. But yeah, I was surprised Eze took it. It was a terrible pen. I expect Mateta to be back on them. I think he's fine for double game week 33. Unless you're in a position with like 5 free transfers, it's not a transfer that I would probably advise. And then yeah, I could do Isak to Watkins for sure. It would probably end up being a hit. I just think that Isak probably gets 80 to 90 minutes. Watkins probably only starts 1. He could, by the way, start both or neither, but he probably starts 1. Does he get more minutes than Isak? Probably like 10 to 20 more minutes. But then is that a transfer I want to make for a hit? Probably not. And Isak is on penalties. Watkins is like third or fourth choice penalty taker. So I just look at everything together. I just think Isak's great. I don't like... He missed 3 big chances, by the way, against Crystal Palace. You might view that as a negative thing. But again, he had 4 decent chances then. 3 big chances. He scored the goal. That's a player that I want in my team. A player that is getting that many chances, is on penalties as well, and is playing for a Newcastle team who are absolutely flying. So by all accounts, I think Isak is a great option to keep. I'm not that confident in Watkins, and therefore I just don't think it's a move that I'll end up making. So that is the team as things stand. Those are the 15 players. Again, if you've skipped to this section, you're wondering why am I showing the team like this. I am on the bench boost this week. So in terms of players that could be sold for me, obviously, if we get negative news on players that I didn't expect to in the press conferences, then I could sell any of them. But right now, there are 3 players that I'm looking at potentially selling, and I've got 2 free transfers. Those are Burn, Murphy, and Foden. Those are the 3. You could chuck Isak in there, but I'm honestly very happy keeping him. So I could just keep it simple, take a -4 hit, be aggressive, sell Burn, Murphy, Foden, and we'll discuss what players I'm looking to bring in a second. Or if I don't want to take a hit, I end up having to keep one of them. So I could just keep Burn and say, do you know what? I'm not convinced by any of the defensive options. I could keep Murphy and just say, yeah, I could move to a Villa midfielder, but Murphy's been playing incredibly well. Or, again, if we get a positive leak on Foden, I could end up just keeping Foden and selling the 2 Newcastle assets. So that's the team. Let's look in a bit more detail about those transfer combinations and the players that I'm looking to bring in. So guys, I thought I would just go over to the FPL site and just do a bit of a live tinkering and show you those transfer combinations, which do depend upon press conference information, any leaks that we might get before the deadline, and just also how aggressive I want to be in terms of, do I want to take that -4 hit, or do I want to just avoid hits, play the bench boost, and just see how it goes? So 2 transfers which I've been planning all week, and honestly I'm still leaning towards doing, is taking Burn and Murphy out, and I know Murphy in particular has been great, but past points won't get me anything now. I just need to look ahead to the future. I really like Kivior. The only concern I have, and this will depend upon information we get, is how close is Calafiori, the other left-footed centre-back that can play at left centre-back. If he's back in training, I think I'll be a little bit more concerned making this move. But Kivior has just been excellent. I would argue playing at an equal level, if not slightly higher, by the way, than even Saliba. I think since stepping in, he has been exceptional. And we know that Arteta, when he had Gabriel and Saliba, he doesn't like messing around with the centrals, like the centre-backs too often. He'll mess around with the left-back and right-back all the time, but those centre-backs don't really change. So I would fancy Kivior to start both in the double, but only if Calafiori is not available. So let's see what news we get there. The reason I wouldn't go Saliba is I just don't have the funds unless I end up downgrading Foden, which is a possibility, by the way. But then the other move would be Murphy to Rodgers. So those are kind of standard moves, right? A lot of people will be doing something similar. Gives me 0.5. So if I make those 2 moves of doing Kivior and Rodgers in, my bench boost would then be Areola, Bradley, Konsa, and Isak. It's a decent bench boost. I'd be very, very happy with that. The concern is, of course, Phil Foden. So let's say the most obvious option, by the way, Phil Foden is leaked to not start, or we have any doubts over him after I've made those 2 moves, is just take a -4 hit. And do you know who we go for? We go for big boy Kev. Do I want to take a hit? No. Does a -4 hit to bring in De Bruyne excite me, though? Yeah, I like the idea of that a lot. It's a bit of fun. Like, worst case scenario, he just doesn't start both. Oh, well. Even if he doesn't start in either, Kev can do damage off the bench. And I'm not necessarily sure that there are any double game week midfielders that I desperately want that would start both. So that is obvious option number 1, is do Kivior and Rodgers in, and then maybe De Bruyne for Foden for a -4. Option number 2, which is probably the more sensible option, is if we get a leak that Foden isn't starting, and I don't want to take the -4, is rather than take Murphy out for Rodgers, is actually just to do Foden to Rodgers. So it's the same set of 2 moves, but I keep Murphy over Foden, because I at least know that Murphy will start Villa. I guess the concern is with Phil Foden is if we know that he doesn't start the first one, can we even confirm that he starts the second? So that is one option. I don't love that, though, because I just do think I just probably don't want to bench boost with both Murphy and Isak. Let's say Villa keep a clean sheet in that game. Half my bench boost is just blank, just like that. And Villa are very good at home. So I'm less keen on that. I suppose one option then, there are so many options, by the way, and sorry if it starts to get confusing, but this is the only way that I think is easy enough to explain it, is go for both Villa attackers in Rodgers and Rashford. And Rashford could definitely start both. He seems to be first choice. I don't think he will, though, Because Emery has explained that he doesn't want to play Rashford off the left. He wants to play him as a striker. And so if we expect Watkins to get a start, Rashford can only get one start. He could play both of them as sort of dual strikers, but I just don't think he'll mess around with that, considering how important it is that Villa get wins in the Prem. So that's an option. But again, am I confident Rashford starts both? No. So is Rashford in for a -4 for Murphy a great option? Not necessarily, but he is first choice penalty taker. So another option I've got, if I go back all the way then and just restore the team completely, is rather than going double Arsenal defence, is actually look at Mikel Merino, who I do really like, by the way. And I think double Arsenal attack isn't necessarily a bad thing against Ipswich and Palace. Palace are conceding goals for fun at the moment, and Ipswich is a great fixture from an attacking perspective. So one other option then is for Murphy, I go for Merino. And then for Foden, I can go Rodgers, which then means I need to bring in someone for Dan Burn. What? Actually, I don't really. I could just then bench boost with Burn, right? That would give me 4 million in the bank, by the way. But Merino and Rodgers coming in, and then the bench boost would be Isak, Burn. Would it be? Yeah, Isak, Burn, and then one of Bradley or Konsa. Probably Isak, Burn, Bradley, and Areola. Dan Burn could absolutely keep a clean sheet, or he could absolutely get an attacking return. You just never know in a single week. So it's not awful. Or I end up taking a -4 for Dan Burn. I'd be very tempted to go for like Van Dijk, because I just don't think there are any doublets. Maybe Ruben Dias, actually. I probably would, wouldn't I? I'd probably go for Ruben Dias because I freed up the Foden spot. That honestly is a little bit spicy. I'm going to click make transfers, but not make them. I get really nervous that I'm accidentally going to confirm them. So Burn to Dias, Foden to Rodgers, Murphy to Merino. So let me try and remember. So the difference would be Dias and Merino versus Kivior and De Bruyne or Rashford. I think Kivior and De Bruyne is probably more fun than Dias and Merino, but I would say that Dias and Merino is probably better for expected minutes. I just think at that stage, I think I'd just rather go Kev. There are probably other combinations that I'm just not considering here, but basically it's those three players there in Foden, Murphy, Burn. Those are the three that I'm looking at probably removing. And then it's any combination of probably 2 doublers and 1 singler, or maybe 3 doublers. But yeah, my most likely set of transfers at the moment, and I'll leave it there. Make sure to tune into the deadline stream, by the way, on Saturday. It's a later deadline at 1:30, so deadline stream will start at 11:30. But it'll probably be all 3 of those going out, I would imagine. And at the moment, I'm leaning towards Kivior, Rodgers, and Kevin De Bruyne. Let me know what you think of that, and then let's finish with just answering a few of your questions. So guys, I feel bad that there was no Game Week preview video yesterday, so I thought I'll just finish with some quick fire questions asked by you guys over on Twitter, and hopefully this helps you with a few of your decisions, as well as obviously the things that I'm thinking about for my own team. So the first question from FPL Shoran was, is there a real danger of using up important transfers for players we won't want after double Game Week 33? This is a genuinely good question. Yes, you always want to target and attack a double game week, but lots of people, let's say you're free hitting 34, or even if you're not, and then coming into your team for Game Week 35, we know that we're probably going to have a double in 36 and a blank in 37, and it's going to be very difficult to navigate without a free hit and without a wild card for a lot of us. Using a transfer for a player that you're not that convinced by just because they've got a double, using up that valuable transfer, and also then maybe booking in another transfer to remove them after the double, is why I don't mind. You can see the man on the graphic here. Maybe just bench boosting or keeping the likes of Isak, Livramento, Murphy. Are the players that you're bringing in, are you that confident they get 2 stars? Are you that confident that they're that much better for 33 that it's worth using maybe 2 transfers to bring them in and then to take them out? Maybe it's worth just saving those transfers and keeping someone like that in. I'm not saying don't attack 33, but I absolutely agree there is a danger if you're sat there with like 4 free transfers, spunking all of them in Game Week 33 and then just going, maybe I should have just kept a couple of those, and some of those just felt a little bit forced. So I'm always someone that will attack doubles. I'm talking about taking a -4 hit myself. But yeah, there is a world in which we do regret doing that, absolutely. Next question from D11NFY says, original plan for many was to transfer out the Newcastle players ahead of 33. Should we be thinking again and stick with the likes of Pope and Murphy regardless of single game week? I think if you're super confident in your replacement in terms of minutes and you think they're a good option, no, I think there's absolutely no concern taking them out. So for me, I'm still pretty confident in making the move of Murphy to Rodgers. If I was thinking of doing Burn to Saliba and I could do that for free, I'd still be pretty confident doing that. However, again, if you are looking at bringing in a player that you're not that confident with, and you're not even sure starts both, then probably not. Like, I probably wouldn't do Burn to Conser for a -4 hit, for example, because I'm not that confident Conser keeps a clean sheet. I wouldn't be that confident in doing Pope to Dean Henderson, for example. But if it's to bring in good players that should have good minutes, I still think they're transfers that are probably worth making. We then get a question from Duxbury Barry. Says, could you talk through the possible blanks because of the FA Cup? After free hit 34, I'm out of chips, so need to strengthen for bench boost, but still plan for 35 onwards. Essentially, the FA Cup final is played during Game Week 37. So the teams that reach the FA Cup final and the teams they're playing against in 37, their fixture cannot go ahead in Game Week 37 at the weekend. We've seen a similar situation in 34 and 33, right? That's why we have blanks in 34, because of the FA Cup semi-final. So, if Man City were to reach the FA Cup final, their game couldn't go ahead on the weekend of 37. The reason I'm saying the weekend of 37 is, as we spoke about for 34, there is a small chance that their games are rearranged for the midweek of Game Week 37, assuming that those teams are not in the Europa League. So, for example, if Spurs reach the Europa League final, their game couldn't go ahead in the midweek against Aston Villa in 37. So if Aston Villa reached the FA Cup final and Spurs reached the Europa League final, that game couldn't take place at any point in 37. It would have to go into 36. However, we think that regardless of which teams are in Europe, that just to make it easy and fair, any teams that reach the FA Cup final, they will have their fixture blank in 37, and that will be brought forward to 36. So what we will probably see, but not definitely, is a double game week in 36 for 4 teams, the 2 teams that reach the FA Cup final, and the 2 teams that they're playing against. So all of Forest, Villa, Bournemouth, Spurs, City, West Ham, etc., they could all double in 36. But we just don't know that right now. When will we know that? Between game week 34 and 35, we'll have an idea, because then we know which teams reach the FA Cup final. Unfortunately, I can't tell you much more right now. Just, we are probably expecting an almost identical situation to what we have in 33 and 34 to take place in 36 and 37. I'll leave it there. FPL Tartinio says, double Arsenal defence or double Arsenal attack on free hit. If I was on free hit, I'd probably attack it with double Arsenal attack, because I think a lot of people not on free hit, myself included, will probably have Raya and then one of Saliba or Kivior and then go for Bukayo Saka. I don't think many people go for double Arsenal attack because it's just a little bit trickier to try and sort with transfers. So yeah, I would be very, very tempted to go that way, but only if you think Marino starts both. I also think Trossard has a small chance of starting both, maybe one on the left wing, one as the 9. So I don't even mind a cheeky punt, if you're on a free hit, of course, on someone like Leandro Trossard. But I don't think you can go horribly wrong with either, but definitely on a free hit, I would have 3 of them. David Flockton says, should we consider moving away from Palace assets after the last 2 games? Again, if I was on free hit, I probably wouldn't have 3 of them. If you have loads of free transfers, you could look to take some of them out. But I just think, who are you moving to? And are there not other transfers that are more of a priority in your team right now? So I don't hate the idea of removing Palace assets, but 2 games is a small sample size. They still have a double. I'm just not sure which assets, other than maybe Arsenal, are much better to move to. And surely at that stage, you have some single game week players you'd rather remove instead. The final question is from Mark Booth. Says, is this the best week to use the triple captain, or is it worth waiting? Don't love the options, if I'm honest. As I said, we could be in a situation where there are some really nice doubles in 36. So if City reach the FA Cup final and they have a double in 36, they could have a double including Southampton, and I think the second game is Bournemouth. If Forest reach the FA Cup final, Chris Wood could have a double game week that looks something like Leicester and West Ham. So you might have some really decent opportunities in game week 36, but we don't know that there will definitely be doubles, and we don't know which teams will actually have those double game weeks. So yes, you could absolutely keep it. If you're not convinced by Saka, you're not convinced by Marmoush, keeping it for 36 could work out well. I just don't know that I'd take the risk. I think if you're not bench boosting this week and you've got the triple captain, I'd probably just play it. I would at the moment play it on Marmoush, but if you want to take a risk on Saka, you can absolutely do that. I will have a deadline decisions video out tomorrow. So if there are any more questions that you want to ask, please ask them down below and I'll try to include some in the deadline decisions, but hopefully that's helped you. So guys, there we have it. That is my team selection video for Game Week 33 with the bench boost active. Hopefully you have enjoyed, and if you have, please do smash that like button. And as I said, less than 800 subscribers away from 150,000. So if you've got to this point and you're not yet subscribed, please do consider subscribing. But until next time, thank you very much. Bye-bye.